Now, opium farmers in Afghanistan are expecting a record harvest this year, bringing huge profits for warlords and heroin traffickers. Poppy production continues to spread at a staggering pace, with some growers claiming government officials are taking a cut from the lucrative business. Well, let's now take a look at this map here. Opium cultivation, as you can see, has spiked by more than a third in 2013, according to the latest UN report. And that's despite international efforts to curb it. With yields up by several thousand tons, Afghanistan's share in the global supply of illicit opiates is likely to hit 90% by the end of this year. And it's easy to see why farmers give in to the temptation to grow illegal crops, with the profits dwarfing those from traditional agriculture. Artis Ganich investigates the problem.
Opium production has increased 40 times in Afghanistan since NATO started its war on terror in 2001. And now the drug money goes to fund terror and God knows what else. Not to mention, of course, thousands of lives taken by heroin consumption every year. But expect more drugs coming out of Afghanistan because the value of opium is so much higher than any other crop available to Afghan farmers that Afghans are not planning on giving up on poppies anytime soon. Even though the mullahs, tribal leaders, and the Afghan government publicly denounce opium production, according to Afghan farmers, they still manage to tax them for that. And this is what one farmer said. Government officials grow opium themselves, and if they don't grow it themselves, they rent out their land to farmers who grow it. If the officials don't care about the law, there is no reason for us to respect it. That's according to this farmer. For more than a decade, NATO and the US, of course, and the government that it had put in place in Kabul have refused to impose a clear ban on poppy growing, possibly thinking such a ban would turn more people against the US. But here's how US officials explain it.
It isn't just trying to eradicate poppy and opium, it's also trying to give people an alternative mechanism to live and to feed their families.
But there is so much money behind narcotics that even with alternative ways to make a living, it's very difficult to imagine that such massive drug production will stop unless there is a clear-cut ban on it. In Washington, I'm Ganesh Chekyan.
Well, let's cross live now to Kabul to talk to Jean-Luc Lemahieu. He's the head of the UN Drug Control Agency in Afghanistan and neighboring countries. Thank you so much, Mr. Lemahieu, for joining us here on RT to discuss the situation. As I understand, you are in Afghanistan. So what more can you tell us about the situation on the ground?
Well, the situation on the ground is obviously very worrying. Since 2010, we have witnessed now for the third time in a row cultivation growth, leading in 2013 to an absolute record of 209,000 hectares of opium. This fits within the wider illicit economy, which seems to be on a boom here in Afghanistan, and that combined with the contraction in the illicit economy does not bode well for the future of Afghanistan.
But who or what would you blame for such a staggering scale of drug production in Afghanistan? In your opinion, who is to blame?
Well, I mean, let's not start a finger pointing, because there's an international shared responsibility here. Evidently, we expect the Afghan government to do a lot more than what we have witnessed so far on the opium cultivation. But the wider region and the international community at large have a stake in this problematics. Don't forget that on the total Afghan opiates profits made globally, $68 billion, less than 10% remains in Afghanistan. So we need to take up our share of the responsibilities. And when we study a little bit closer what has happened, then there is a kind of a paradox. On one hand, we see that within the counter-narcotic institutions, we have made tangible progress. More is being seized. The Ministry of Counter-Narcotics has policies set out. The demand reduction services have increased as well. But nonetheless, and that's the paradox,
yes,
when you look at the overall addiction rates,
how would you describe in general?
Rates, then you see an increase.
How would you describe the actions of the government,
so
the effort of the government? Exactly. No, the question also is, how would you describe the governmental effort to tackle the problem?
Well, the issue is that so far the narcotics has been considered as a rather marginal issue, siloed in an insular manner within the counter-narcotic institutions. And that, of course, is a big mistake. That is something which we need to correct now. It cannot be left to counter-narcotics institutions only. We need to make sure that the development agencies, that security actors, that everybody plays a role in this, And it's not only, and definitely we need to provide for alternative livelihoods for the farmers, but it's not only this. We need to stop the impunity, the fragmentation, and this illicit economy which allows people to grow, cultivate opium in a way which remains unpunished today.
And what, in your opinion, could be done to perhaps revert the statistic there or somehow derail this, what seems to be an unstoppable process? Very briefly, if you could.
It is not an unstoppable issue. We can't stop it. The remedies are known, but we need now to have the political will of all involved to make this to happen. As long as the security and development aid agents are worried to get involved in narcotics because they don't consider it as being their business, then we will continue with this evil. I mean, we need to make sure that all involved get involved and that we get a comprehensive framework together, an integrated framework. We can not talk about an opium farmer any longer. We talk about the Afghan farmer. An Afghan farmer grows different crops, and among them opium. If you don't have an integrated agriculture policy dealing with illicit crops as well, then we are bound to fail as well in the future. So we need to correct the situation now as soon as feasible.
All right, Mr. Lemahieu, thank you so much for talking to me here on RT and discussing the situation in Afghanistan regarding drug production.